Good morning, everybody. This is Martin John, and I'm here talking about the Tao Te Ching. The Tao Te Ching is an ancient text written about 600 BC, and it is filled with all sorts of enigmatic wisdom and information on how we can live a more reasonable life. Tao is just a word that expresses something that can't be expressed. And the Tao Te Ching is a text of 81 chapters that are trying to point to something that can't really be defined with words, because everybody approaches every word from a different perspective. It's impossible to be able to say something and get everyone, although everyone may think they have consensus. When we start talking about things like Tao, like God, like the universal truths, it's not easy to put those things in words. You know, even when I say, oh, I'm angry, what I mean could mean very, very different things to different people. And the feeling, the subtle difference between one anger and another anger words can't even describe those things sometimes because they're so subtle. Subtlety is such an important thing to be able to be in touch with. Subtlety in our bodies, subtlety in our words, subtlety in our relationships. To be able to feel within the subtle is a real gift that has to be honed. We all have the ability to attach to the subtle and to find the subtle things within ourselves. Have you ever been, and this is what I talk about when I talk about the idea of like, do you like that you're doing this? Because that changes moment to moment. You could be thinking about something and feel good about what you're thinking about. But then at some point, if you're in touch with the subtle, you can get in touch with the idea that, you know what, I actually don't feel good about thinking about this anymore. I had the thought, just it came and went really quick. But if you're not in touch with the subtle, you might not notice it, but you might have had the thought, I'm sick of thinking about this. I want to stop. And then you continue to tell the story in your head. You continue to go through it. You continue to go down this spiral of thoughts. If you're not in touch with the subtle, well, you're going to miss that thought. It's going to come and go, and you won't even recognize it. I told a story the other day of somebody that I knew, and we were talking, and they were spending a lot of time in bed. So much so that I was like, even being comfortable hurts after a while. And she looked at me and she was saying, yeah, it's like uncomfortable to be in bed. And I was like, yeah, but we have the story that being in bed is comfortable and that's where I want to be. But our bodies are telling us otherwise, right? And these are the kind of lives that we're living in our society today, right? It's all just like, well, this is the comfortable thing. And then you take that as fact and you don't look at the subtle. The subtlety is lost on you. But that's the thing, like the whole point of, this program and Noom and other things like that, other parts of our lives that aren't trying to just distract us from who we are, but turn us back so that we could head back in the direction of who we are and to be who we are. This is why I talk about recovering yourself. At the end of every show, I say, keep recovering yourself. Because when we lose ourselves, when we ignore those subtle things, I read a Tao the other day to you guys. It was all about, avoiding the easy has never been the problem, right? Or like avoiding problems has never been a problem because all you have to do is the easy thing. Yes, the easy thing might be like telling somebody the truth when you've been lying to them for a long time. And that doesn't feel easy, right? But what's harder is continuing to lie, continuing to tell those stories, continuing to do all of those things that, make it difficult. And that's the subtle, right? You can feel it in your gut. It's subtle. Now, it's so subtle you can ignore it. And that's one of the problems with subtlety. And, well, the difference between subtlety and conspicuous, right? Conspicuous you can't ignore. Subtle you can. So when you're out here in the world and the subtlety is trying to communicate with you, and then all of a sudden your subtlety, like, meets up against some conspicuousness, well, the conspicuousness is going to be so obvious, you're going to do that. But it is within the subtle that everything, provides truth and provides the easy path, the subtle. It's oftentimes we try and, solve a problem with a conspicuous answer. But that's not always going to be the answer. It's very rarely the answer I've found. That's not to say that other people haven't found that the conspicuous is the answer. But I think conspicuousness provides you with answers and more problems. And then you need even something even more conspicuous in order to answer that problem. So this program, what I do is I invite you up to chat with me a little bit about what's going on with you. So I'm just going to be like, hey, what's going on with you? And it's very chill. Nothing. I'm not trying to dig. I'm not trying to get you to share anything you don't want to share. Anything you want to share, you're welcome to. Just in terms of what's happening in your life. And it can be very vague, and it can be very, it can just be, you can give me a riddle. I don't have to know the answer. I'm not interested. And then I'm going to ask you to pick a number between 1 and 81. Because like I said earlier, there are 81 chapters in the Tao Te Ching, and each one of those chapters has, probably 250 words or less. And then I'll read through it with you, ask you if anything stood out to you. And if nothing did, that's okay too. When we hear these for the first time, it's really difficult to take them apart because they're so filled with stuff. It's so filled with information, so filled with one thing leads to another, and so we have to fill in the blanks sometimes. We have to say, well, what does this mean to me? So today I went to a random number generator and I picked number 50. I'm going to go ahead and read 50 to you and see what this has for me today. Every being is entrusted with life for a time. However, it is only a prelude to death. Some live as optimists, embracing life. Others live as pessimists, embracing death. Some even live in preservation, passively living, advancing towards death. The master lives aware of her appointment with death. This brings her to knowing real life. She cannot be harmed by rhinoceros or man. Her movements flow from her being. She cannot be fooled by illusion or hallucination. Her actions flow from her being. She has freed herself of all separateness, even the distinction between life and death. So this is entitled Awareness of Death. I think a lot of times people want to just kind of be like, I know I'm going to die. I'm not afraid to die. And although that's great, is it true? Because it's very easy to say something, especially today, right? We live in a world in which we can say almost anything. And once again, words cannot express Tao. This is what I spoke about at the beginning of this show, only 8 minutes ago. Words mean so much. And they don't mean everything. When I say, oh yes, I am confident in myself, although that's true, the Tao does say when you describe something as straight, you see how crooked it is. So when I describe myself as confident, I see all the places in which I am not. When I say, without fear of being corrected or anything like that, when I say, I am not afraid to die, I open myself up to seeing all the places where I still am afraid to die. You know, it's interesting. I talk about, as an artist, I talk about this idea of showing someone your work. You can go about your business and make your art and just make it. And it could be all very good or good enough. And then you show it to somebody. And when you show it to somebody, all of a sudden, you start seeing it from a different perspective. You start seeing it from this place that they're seeing it from. You start seeing it from the outside again. And this isn't easy to do because all of a sudden you start seeing all the things that you weren't aware of because you weren't looking at it from the eyes of a viewer. You were looking at it from your eyes, the eyes of the creator. And so you loved it. You know, it's like you love your child. You love your child. You love your child. But then you see them treat someone poorly. And you say, what is this? Who is this? Yes, I love this child, but now I know that, like, I still have work to do in terms of making sure that they understand humility, or they understand, so words are really important. When that happens, right, when we get to a place where we can feel that subtlety become more conspicuous, right? That's what we're talking about. So, like, are you aware of your death? You know you're going to die, but are you aware of your death? And as it says here, the master has gotten rid of the distinction of the separateness of the distinction between life and death. Just like you can get rid of the distinction between good and bad in your creative process, let's say. Right? I can make something, and if I don't have a distinction between good and bad, I show it to somebody, and it just is. It is what it is, and it's not about me taking credit. It's not about me being in the middle of it. It's not about me being the creator. So every being is entrusted with life for a time. Every being is entrusted with life for a time. However, it is only a prelude to death. Now, there are a couple verses in the Tao Te Ching that talk about death as being what we live for, right? We live, it's like life is a prelude to death. There's another one that states, people aren't naturally afraid to die as what we were born to do. And then we live our lives in this conspicuous fear of death. We live our lives trying to consume so much so that we can avoid death. But death, and even all of these, billionaires that are investing in, life extending research. It's like, wait, why don't you just live your life rather than waste all of this life so that you can research living a longer life because you wasted all of your time? Why don't you just live right now? And then we go into this section of the way people live, right? Some live as optimists, embracing life. Maybe we can look at those people as the ones who, are just enamored by the manifestation, axe throwers and zip liners and parachuters and all of like they embrace life. Or maybe some of those people are pessimists embracing death. I don't know. I don't know how to. I would say that those were the optimists embracing life and, getting close to death in order to really, really embrace life. Others live as pessimists embracing death, maybe those are the pessimists. I don't know. It's always hard to define who is who in this, because I think it's all individual. Every individual, whether they approach life by embracing it or approach life by embracing death, they're going to be able to have those experiences for themselves. It's not about me defining those experiences, it's about them having those experiences and how they do that. Some even live in preservation, passively living, advancing towards death. So these are probably people that don't do anything with their lives, that they don't do anything new, they don't challenge themselves, they don't go out. So there are so many different ways to live life, and that's all this is really saying. Every being is entrusted with life for a time, and you can do what you want with it. It is only a prelude to death. So you can embrace life, and you're going to die. You can embrace death, and you're going to die. You could passively live, and you are still going to die. There's nothing that you can do. There's no style of living that you could live to avoid your appointment with death. So then it talks about, so we start with a fact. Every being is entrusted with life, and it's only a prelude to death. That is what Tao is stating. This is true. Some live in this way, some live in that way, some even live in a third way, and it's all good. It doesn't matter how they want to deal with the life that they were entrusted with. Now we talk about the master, and the master isn't going to live in a way that others live. That's why they're the master. They're the master of Tao. The master lives aware of her appointment with death. So she's not embracing anything. She's not trying to embrace life because she's aware she's going to die. She's not embracing death because eventually she will die. She doesn't have to worry about that now. And she's not going to try and preserve her life because she is going to die one day, and that might be today. So why live passively? This brings her to knowing real life. Why do you think that is? Why do you think this brings her to knowing real life? If she knows she's going to die, that means she's not living. She's living knowing she's going to die, not as if she's going to die today. She's living knowing she's going to die, and that every moment is precious. No matter what needs to be done. Sometimes you gotta sit. Sometimes you gotta fix the porch. Sometimes you gotta be in a relationship. Sometimes you gotta be in an argument. Be here. Be in that right now. Don't be afraid of that. Don't be afraid of, losing a friend, because this moment, no matter what it is here. And yes, you're going to die. So love this moment. Love this person and be honest with them. Love this person. Do the easy thing and be straightforward. How do you live your life when knowing real life? Don't try to be a nice person. Be who you are in this moment. You are going to die one day, and there's no other time to be who you are. Feel the subtlety, because the conspicuous is taking you away from yourself and putting more attention on that. I mean, here in the United States, we're in the middle of an election cycle, and how much of your time is spent outside of your body, like reading or looking at political gobbledygook? Right? That really doesn't mean anything. Doesn't have any value. It's just sensationalism. It's like if we take it in our heart that, you know what, I'm going to die one day, and my family is out in the other room while I'm scrolling Instagram. Is that what I want to be doing with my time? When you know you're going to die, and this can bring you to knowing real life. This can bring you to know, like I know I'm going to die. And so do I want to complain about the work I have to do around my house? Do I want to complain that I got to mow the lawn or do the thing or whatever? Like if I spend my time complaining about the things I want to do, am I engaged in my life? No, I'm engaged in a thing. Like be engaged, like do the thing. And feel what it feels like to do it without complaint, without frustration, without judgment. That's why it says here, she cannot be harmed by rhinoceros or man. Her movements flow from her being. Trust me, I don't care how much of a master you are. If you get run down by a rhinoceros, you're going to be harmed, right? This is where the subtlety comes in. The master knows that her body is forfeit. Her body is going to die. And by living in this moment, she is living. And if a rhinoceros stampede kills her, well, so be it. She's not being harmed. She has an appointment with death anyway. That just might be what this is. And that's what this is saying. It's saying, look, there's a subtlety to it all. And if you're aware of your appointment with death, you will approach every moment with life. And then, yes, there will be a time you will die. Of course. And that's okay too. And if that happens because of a rhinoceros stampede, so be it. You weren't harmed. You just arrived at your appointment with death. Her movements flow from her being, it says. Now, she's not like we talk about law of attraction. We talk about other stuff like that. I mean, when you put that in, do you think a master who is aware of her appointment with death is going to attract a death in which she's going to get stampeded by rhinoceros? Probably not. Probably not. That doesn't mean she won't. It just means that, that's it's unlikely. It's unlikely. Because if you are like, that seems like an accident or an incident of someone that is very much afraid of death. Right. So, but I'm not trying to put labels on that or anything, because maybe not. Because every individual is going to have their own ideas of how these things work. And so that's what's going to come to the fore. Like, the more energy you put towards something, right? Where attention goes, energy flows, all of that stuff. So she cannot be harmed by rhinoceros or man. Her movements flow from her being. As she moves through life, they flow from her. She is being directed. Why? Because she is living in collaboration with Tao. She is living in collaboration with other things. So she will be steered clear of the rhinoceros stampede. However, if the rhinoceros stampede does become part of her life, that's something that she will experience as her appointment with death. She's not going to experience that with grief, and she's not going to experience that with fear, right? Because she cannot be harmed by them. She knows that she is more than simply her body. She knows she is more than simply what is manifest. She cannot be fooled by illusion or hallucination. Her actions flow from her being. Now, when I translated this, I couldn't help but, bring up all of the conversations of consciousness, right? We have lots of conversations around consciousness and what is consciousness. And consciousness is, like a lot of people talk about these are controlled hallucinations that we're having, right? Like all of our lives are individual little hallucinations, and we're, there's no proof that we're not hallucinating. And the thing is when you hallucinate, or and I don't want to use the word hallucinate because you're going to think I'm talking about being on a drug, but I'm talking about living life. When we see things in life from a certain perspective, right? So like if you have a frame of reference that the world is hard on you, and if that frame of reference tints all of your experiences, which it will, then you find yourself in a place where your actions are going to be dictated by that frame of reference. And if your actions are being dictated by that frame of reference, you're being fooled, right? You're being fooled into taking action because nobody's trying to hurt you. But if you have a frame of reference because you grew up in a household in which people were trying to hurt you, now as an adult, maybe nobody is trying to hurt you, but you may be acting from the space where everybody is trying to hurt you. And if that's the case, that's how you're being fooled, right? This is why it says she cannot be fooled by illusion or hallucination. She cannot be fooled by that which she is under the influence because she's no longer under the influence. But being under the influence is an illusion that something is going to be somewhere. Having a frame of reference is tinting the world with a specific hallucination, an idea, a frame of reference, all of this kind of stuff that we live in when we make assumptions about other people or tell stories about why they do what they do, right? If we believe those stories, that's us being fooled by illusion or hallucination. And then we take action because of what we believe about that illusion or hallucination. That's why it says she cannot be fooled by illusion or hallucination. Her actions flow from her being. We have to remember that the master has not only cured herself of all of the frames of reference, all of the under the influence, she knows herself, right? She has recovered herself, as I would say, completely. And because of that, we look at all of these things that we may currently be wrapped up in this world, like politics and stuff. But what is politics? Politics, hinges on fear and other things like that. And as long as we can keep people afraid, and people love being afraid because, everybody that's alive today is afraid of a lot of stuff, afraid of judgment, afraid of being left out, afraid of, and why is that? Because in the generations that we all grew up in, those things were being, pushed out. Those are the things that everybody wanted to make sure that we had adequate fear so that we could be, vigilant, right? And that means that we're being fooled by this story as children, and now as an adults, they've turned into full-blown illusions and hallucinations that we live day to day, right? And so our actions are coming from that place of fear, our actions that we take, the movements that we take in our lives, the actions that we take in our days, like all of these things are being informed, they're being driven by fear, by story, by illusion or hallucination, right? What is illusion and hallucination? I don't want to think that, I'm not trying to say you're all on, mescaline, but I am saying that we're all coming from a certain frame of reference. Even myself, like I have certain frames of reference. And when I get triggered, I look at those so I can reduce the illusion, so I can reduce the hallucination under which I am being affected. And that's, the master lives aware of our appointment with death. This brings her to knowing real life. When you're not afraid to die, you're not going to follow the path of others that have, tried to get you to be afraid of death, be afraid of being alone, be afraid of being, harmed, be afraid of being a victim. Whether it's being harmed physically by rhinoceros or man, physically or emotionally, right? She cannot be fooled by illusion or hallucination. Illusion is like the future and the past. You did this. That was a mistake. You're going to be hurt. You're going to get, you're going to have to deal with the recompense of something, right? But when you don't live with that fear, when you live knowing that you have an appointment with death coming, that brings you to knowing your real life, because you live your real life, who you are. And then the last line, she has freed herself of all separateness, even the distinction between life and death. Now this is a stretch. Even the distinction between life and death. She has freed herself from all separateness. Now this has a lot of meaning, because what it says is that you're not separate from others. You're not separate from that rhinoceros. You're not separate from the universe in any way. You're not separate from Tao. She has freed herself of all separateness. And she's aware of her appointment with death, but that's just for her body. There's no separateness between her body and soul. It's all the same. It's just like the soul is in here, and the soul, when it is not in here, like, it doesn't mean that it's never been there. It's like it's learning from it. It's part of it. Just like you have friendships, and there's no, like, sometimes friendships just pass, and that doesn't mean that you aren't forever changed by that. Your soul will forever be changed by its relationship to this body, to this life. Right? You are entrusted with life for a time. However, it's only a prelude to death. Now you can live in different ways in order to embrace this time of your life. Or you can just know that this is going to end. And really be present to this moment. This moment will die. Friendships and relationships will die. People in our lives will die. And all of that will alter our lives a little bit, will teach us something. But it doesn't end who we are. It just continues to evolve, as you will when your appointment with physical death comes. And that's okay too. And there's no difference. Like this, like underneath the surface, when you meditate, when you're quiet, when you're aware of all of the subtle things within you, that's who you are, right? And it's not about your body. It's not about your thoughts. It's not about your mind. It's not about your history. It's not about the illusion. It's not about the story. It's not about any of that. Like the you that is deep within yourself, that you do have access to, although it will take some attachment to the subtle in order to get there. You have to, be quiet. You have to be comfortable in these spaces. There are no questions that have answers. Right? Like we can bring up all the questions in the world and come up with all the answers, not be anywhere closer to knowing that subtlety within us. But just being here, and even when we're quiet and we close our eyes and we allow ourselves to do the meditation thing, but we don't have to quote unquote meditate either. Like that's just another word. That's separateness. That's taking one moment and separating it from all the other moments. You know, a lot of times people say, well, don't meditate when you drive. It's like, well, what is meditation then? If it's something that you do separately from everything else. Because you can, I do it. Because there is enough in me to be able to have a meditation while driving and being present. And the nice thing is I never get upset when that kind of stuff happens. You know, like it's always a fun experience because I'm open and I'm more aware and more in tune with the moments. Mandeep, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am well. Did I pronounce that properly?
Yes, you did.
Okay, good. I believe this is the first time we've spoken. Is that true?
Yes.
Yes. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, did you want to say something before I ask how you are doing?
Oh, no. No.
No. Okay. I just want to be still for a moment and connect with you.
Okay.
How are you doing?
Good.
Yeah. Okay. Have you heard this show before?
Oh, no, I just downloaded this app.
Oh,
So
welcome.
I'm just browsing around.
Yes. Did you mean to come up and talk with me?
No.
No.
I'm just sorry. I was just browsing. So I said, okay, yes, listen to this.
You have a beautiful accent. Where are you from?
Canada.
Canada. Okay.
Where are you?
I'm in Chicago. We're just outside of Chicago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So on this show, the Tao of the Day, have you heard of the Tao Te Ching?
Mm-hmm. No.
No? Okay, well, the Tao Te Ching is an ancient text, and it consists of 81 chapters. And the chapters are very short, usually less than 200, 250 words. And what I do is I ask my guests, usually like, hey, what's going on, like I did earlier. And then I ask you to pick a number between 1 and 81. And if you don't have a number, I can use a random number generator for you, if that's something you would like. And this is kind of like an oracle deck. You pick a number, we read it, and we kind of go through what it says and see if it has any relevance to anything that you're facing.
Okay.
Well, would you like to pick a number?
Sure, 23.
23. 23 is entitled Speaking from Tao. Now, because you're not familiar with Tao, I'm going to use a short sort of, I'm going to replace the word Tao and like speaking from your heart.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, speaking from your heart. As, you know, like we know, like our heart is pure, right? It wants to communicate. Mm-hmm. So what this says is when you speak, say what is to be said, but no more. Now, I want you to know, I'm going to read this, and then if anything stands out to you, you let me know. Otherwise, we'll go in and talk about different sections, maybe go through it line by line, okay? Okay. When you speak, say what is to be said, but no more. Neither wind nor storms last all day. Nature expresses itself completely, and no matter how wild it may get, then returns to stillness. When you open yourself to Tao, when you open yourself to your heart, you say what is to be said, and everyone will agree, because when you speak from your heart can be heard. He who aligns with Tao will only hear Tao. He who aligns with manifestation will only hear manifestation. He who aligns with failure will only hear failure. How it is heard is not your concern. Trust what is to be said, and everything will fall into place. What did you hear there?
Speak from your heart.
What was that?
Speak from your heart.
Yeah. You know, and what's really nice about this is kind of how it ends, right? How it is heard is not your concern. How often do we get to a place where it's like we're speaking from our head, where it's like, oh,
Mostly.
And it's like,
Yes.
oh, I think that they want to hear something and I'm going to tell them something that they want to hear so that I don't have to have conflict or something, right?
Oh my God, that's so true.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's like, but how it is heard is not your concern. If they're aligned with hearing criticism, are we going to avoid criticizing them? Because they're going to hear criticism. I'm not criticizing them, but who's going to hear criticism? They are.
Yes.
Because they're aligned with being criticized. And it puts us as speakers, especially people who are trying to construct a sentence that like someone will hear. It's just like, oh, I know every time I say something, they feel like I'm criticizing them. So I'm going to say this way. And we can't even escape it. Every time we try to, construct the right sentence, it's like, oh, I don't know if you have children, but if you have like a teenager, that's the worst. Like trying to communicate with somebody, right?
Mm-hmm.
So have you had experiences like that?
Yes.
Yeah.
I have 4 kids all the time. And a husband.
And a husband.
Yes.
How it is heard is not your concern. But if you're speaking from your heart, so, it starts with, when you speak, say what is to be said and no more.
But I have a question, sorry.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Because then there is going to be conflict, right?
Is there?
Yes.
So the idea is, the idea here is that you say what is to be said and you speak from your heart. And the conflict, in the Tao, there are also other verses. I mean, obviously there's 81 that talk about conflict and that talk about like, are you going to accept the invitation to conflict? So if you say what is to be said, if you're honest and you say what is to be said and you speak from your heart, this is loving. Now, this isn't constructing a sentence that sounds like it was spoken from the heart. So this is really being guided by the subtle. This isn't convoluted. It's not contrived. It is honest and it is in the heart. Now, the fear that you have of saying something wrong in the future is in your head. The fear of conflict is in your head because you don't know what's going to happen when you say what needs to be said and no more.
Okay.
And if you align with judgment, you are going to find a judgment, right? Like if you align, and if you find conflict when you say something, that doesn't mean you have to change what you said, but you have to look at the conflict and where that conflict exists within you. So if you tell your husband, if you're honest with your husband and you're like, oh, I don't want to cook tonight, or I don't want to, I mean, I don't know if you cook for your husband, but, that's a traditional sort of thing. You're just like, I want to break from my role in this. And if that creates conflict in him and he gets upset, well, you've expressed yourself. Now he can be upset as he wants. You've already expressed yourself. Now you don't have to linger there. Now, if you feel compelled to accept the invitation to conflict with your husband, because you're not the one conflicting, you're just expressing yourself from your heart. You're like, I need this because of, whatever it is. And this is a very sort of simple thing. Because there could be other things as well. But if he then sends you an invitation to conflict by arguing your point. You can just be still, and you can be like, oh, that's cute. I love you. I'm going to go sit down now.
No, I need more energy for that.
Yes, I know. but there is this, when we find ourselves in relationships, especially ones in which we have coddled others or played a role, the moment we want to change that role, we threaten the other person. And that's difficult because we didn't mean to do that. We didn't mean to be the person that you believe we are. We weren't lying, but we weren't being honest with ourselves.
Yeah.
And it takes a long time to get to a place where we can really speak and say what is to be said, but no more. But most of the time, we're not really speaking from our heart. We're speaking from our head. We're speaking from, we're speaking from a fear of what can happen if I say the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And what it says here is when you open yourself to Tao, you say what is to be said. And everyone will agree, because when you speak from that place, that's the only thing that can be heard. But how it is heard isn't your concern. If your husband hears it as an attack, well, you weren't saying it as an attack. You were saying it from your heart. You were saying it from a place of loving yourself. And because there's no separation, that's loving him as well.
Yes.
And yes, you will find people wanting to invite you to conflict when you start speaking from your heart. Especially if you have suppressed your heart for a long time.
Yes. How to get there then?
Well, it is, and it starts it starts by the pendulum always swings. And so you are going to make mistakes. But you also have to recognize that those aren't mistakes. Those are lessons for you to learn from as well. And it's not that you learn by submitting to someone else's will.
Yeah.
But we have to surrender to the idea that we have things to learn as well. This isn't, you are living in collaboration with 5 other people, right? Yes. This isn't your world and they're just living in it. But, and the Tao talks about surrendering to what this is, but we don't submit to things. We surrender to the truth of this situation and we learn about ourselves through this experience. Right? When we're afraid that our husband is going to, I don't know what your situation is, but if we're afraid that our husband is going to tell us we're not good enough and that we're not worthy of love, well, if that's the fear deep down, it might not be obvious that's what it is. But if that's the fear we have, then we ask, well, do I have a relationship in my life with people withholding love from me? Maybe my parents, because I didn't do good in school, and so they didn't talk to me for a week. And it's like, that was a traumatic experience that we may have had as a child, and now as an adult, we're holding on to this fear of being put out. And if we're going to be put out, well, then we're in danger. And so when we speak from our heart and it brings up this fear, well, guess what? Our work is the fear, not the relationship. The relationship needs to be what the relationship is, and that's a vehicle for us healing as individuals, not becoming a slave to another person or the property of another person in the way that, a chair is a property, And so
Yeah.
it's a long path of learning about ourselves, because the relationship is an extension of who we are.
Yes. How come you're so, I don't know the word to say, like, oh,
Yeah.
like
And
when I get, even if sometimes I'm speaking from my heart, then anger comes up, like,
yeah.
and the other person just not agreeing or just like not listening nicely.
No, but, and you're going to drop out. So this app, there's 15 minutes for you to talk. You can come back up if you'd like, if you have the time. Otherwise, I'm going to answer your question. And if you're listening, we can go ahead and continue. Like it says here in this verse, like you said, they're not listening nicely. Well, you're not necessarily speaking nicely. You're speaking from your heart. And that might not be nice at all. But it's honest. Now, he who aligns with Tao, he who aligns with their heart, will only hear from their heart what you're saying. He who aligns with manifestation will only hear manifestation. He who aligns with failure will only hear failure. And this is important. How it is heard is not your concern. If you are confident you're speaking from your heart, if you know to the best of your ability you're speaking from your heart, well, then how it is heard is not your concern. Now, when you're done with that conversation, you might be able to look at your words and say, oh, you know what? That really wasn't from my heart. That was from my ego. And then you have to learn. You have to learn, because it's subtlety. How do I speak from my heart? How do I speak from Tao? How do I do these things? And as we step into ourselves, as we continue to do those things, like I said, it's a long process. Once again, how it is heard, not our concern. They can listen unkindly and hear things that are not nice and respond in a way that is like they're not speaking from their heart. They're speaking from their head, and they're trying to logically, talk around you or, work around the truth that you laid bare because you're speaking from your heart. How it is heard can't be your concern, because they can hear whatever they want. Just like it says here, if they're aligned with Tao, they'll hear Tao. If they're aligned with manifestation, they'll hear manifestation. If they're aligned with failure, they'll hear failure. If they're aligned with criticism, they'll hear criticism. If they're aligned with, the patriarchy, they're going to hear the patriarchy, right? They're going to hear all of that stuff. And so that's where that is. And I appreciate you coming up, and I'm looking forward to chatting with you again sometime. I'm going to take a note real quick before I bring up Auntie Sparkly. And I appreciate you. Thank you. All right, we're going to bring up Auntie Sparkly. Hey, how are you, dear?
I'm alright. I want to pick
Good.
the number. Um, can I pick the number 85? Because
No,
that's the
because
year
we
my
only go up
mom
to
graduated.
81.
Oh, 81? Okay, well I'll take
Yeah.
81.
Okay. Number 81 it is. I'll go straight to it. 81 is entitled Blossoming Leader. Oh, this is, it's interesting because this goes back
Repeat that.
to the idea of what we hear and words again, just as we were speaking about a moment ago. True words may not sound comforting, yet comfort those they are meant for. However, comforting words are never true. Connected to source, There is no desire to prove. Desire to prove only exposes separation from source. The master's possessions are not part of the manifestation. Giving away her possessions, she only receives more. Tao blesses everyone in this way. When this blessing can be received, domination and power will yield. All people will blossom as leaders. So that's 81. I want to talk.
Excuse.
What? Go on.
I'm so sorry about that. It's my mom. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. No, that's okay. So what's interesting is as we're coming out of this 23, which is when you speak, say what is to be said and no more, we start this one with true words may not sound comforting. Right? So this is about the person who's receiving true words. True words are coming from the heart of the person telling us. Just like we were saying before, when you speak from Tao, when you speak from your heart, that is what can be heard. If you're aligned with Tao, you'll hear Tao. If you're aligned with manifestation, you'll hear manifestation. If you're aligned with failure, you'll hear failure. True words may not sound comforting. And if you're aligned with discomfort, the words that are being said to you, those true words, even though they're true, they might not sound comforting. Yet, if you're open to receiving that set message, comforting words, like they comfort those they are meant for. Right? So we're going from 23 to 81, and we're looking at these two together now. It's just like, however, comforting words are never true. That's what I want to say about that 23. When you are speaking from your head and you're trying to comfort someone, that's never true. And even if they sound comforting, they may not comfort those they are meant for. But true words, even though they don't sound comforting, comfort those they are meant for. This is a big paradox. And if you bring your head into it and you try and, measure it and try and control how things are heard, well, you're going to find yourself in a pit, because you're not going to be able to dig yourself out of that, because you can't control how things are heard. You can only control what you say. And the more you try to control what you say, the less you get from the further you get from your heart. And your heart is the thing that should be leading the way, because that's love and that's connection. Connected to source. Yeah. Okay. You're back. So the connected to source, connected to God, right? Jesus, all of this, right? Connected to source, that energy that's behind it all. There is no desire to prove. You don't have to prove that you care for somebody, but when you speak, your care will be shown. It will come out naturally, because you're speaking true words, and that care will comfort those that those words are meant for. The more you think about everything that you say in all of your interactions, the more you have a desire to prove you are a certain kind of person. Prove you are a loving person. I'm a loving person. See all that I do that is loving. And it's like, there's nothing to prove. You don't have to prove anything. That only exposes your separation from source, how far you are from trusting source, trusting God, trusting your heart, trusting all of this. Trusting Tao. The master's possessions are not part of the manifestation. They're nothing that you can prove. The possessions here aren't things. They're words. They're the direction of your heart. It's what your life is blossoming into. That's your possession. And then showing people that, just like when you see a flower blossom and that flower brings you happiness, that happiness infects the flower, and the flower continues to shine as it is, and continues to give joy. And then the more people that look at it, the longer it lasts. And eventually it, like I was talking about in number 50, it knows its appointment with death and moves on.
Yeah.
Tao blesses everyone in this way. Yeah.
Mhm.
Did you have something to say?
Yes, I have to say I'm so sorry. I was helping my mom with something, and
That's okay.
I had to do take care of personal business.
Yeah, I understand. Okay. Well, yeah, this one wraps up with Tao blesses everyone in this way. So if you speak true words, they're going to align. And when this blessing can be received. And that's a really big line in this, because this blessing of being in touch with your heart, being in touch with Tao, can't always be received. But when it can be received, and the reason that it can't be received is because we have fear. And we have ideas and frames of reference, and we have all of this stuff going on in our lives that get in the way of us being able to receive this blessing. But when this blessing can be received, domination and power will yield, while all people will blossom as leaders. That means you will no longer want to dominate people. You will no longer want to be in a position of power, because you will recognize that everyone is the CEO of their own lives, essentially. And that everyone is doing what they do, and they are hearing what they hear, and they are acting the way they act, and there's nothing that you can do about that. They're going to do what they do, and all you do is love them, right? Connected to source, there's no desire to prove. You don't have to prove that you're right. You don't have to prove that they're right. You can allow them to be who they are, while you are who you are.
So evidently you're saying that the truth come out eventually. It'll come out on its own.
Yeah, it always does, and it's interesting. I think a lot of times when we heal ourselves in one way or another, we think that we have something to teach. And when we think we have something to teach, we get in our head and we start thinking, oh, I have something to teach you. But when we talk about Tao, it's like, oh, you have something to learn, and you're going to learn it from wherever you learn it. I'm going to go ahead and live my life without having to think it's my responsibility to teach you anything. It's not my responsibility to make sure that you understand yourself. I'm going to live as I do. And if that inspires you to grow, great. But that's not me doing anything. That's you living your life. And that's you, right? I can't get you to hear my words the way that I'm saying them. But you can hear the words the way you're hearing them. And I don't have to control how that is heard. I don't have to tell you how to hear my words.
Right. I'm so sorry. That was my radio.
Yeah. That's
Apologize.
okay. I heard it. That's okay. All right. Well, that's the end of it. So I can let you go and go about what it is you're doing. And it's always wonderful to chat with you. I'll go ahead and send this text to you, and you can look at it throughout the day.
Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay. Thank you guys so much for coming up and chatting with me. We read 23, number 50, and number 81 today. I'm going to go ahead and sign out. Thank you guys so much for listening. I hope you guys get a lot out of this, and hear what you need to hear. And I'm looking forward to connecting with each and every one of you. Thank you so much. I love you guys. And until next time, keep recovering yourself.